Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Legacy Battle. I am Michael Adams. My panelists tonight from the Gridiron Battle Zone, Brian King and Leroy Lester Thompson, who'll be around here in a little bit. From Steelers Nation South, Rollo Cawthon. Our debate tonight is the South Carolina Gamecocks football Mount Rushmore. We are joined by Rick Sanford. He's a former safety. He was an NFL All-Pro with the Patriots, also played with the Seahawks. In college, he was a first-team All-American and the first player in South Carolina Gamecocks history to be drafted in the first round of the NFL draft. In 1998, he was inducted into the South Carolina Athletics Hall of Fame. Rick, thank you so much for coming on and joining us.
Yeah, thank y'all very much for having me. I'm looking forward to the Mount Rushmore.
Awesome. As always, we're going to have a Q&A afterwards for Rick, a little bit about his career and some of the things he does now, which I'm going to be asking him about that South Carolina Hall of Fame there. But our honorable mentions tonight, two players that they just missed our list, Rick being one, and I hope I say this one, Steve Taneyhill, also on our list. But we'll start out with Rollo's players tonight. Rollo, go ahead.
My first player is a former friend of the show. Check the archives. John Abraham. He was born in Timminsville, South Carolina, and he was a star in track and basketball at Lamar High School. And he didn't play football until his senior year, where he also played with another former friend of the show, LeVon Kirkwood. He was recruited to play football at South Carolina, and the rest they say is history. He his 23 and a half sacks in his Gamecock career, and he led the team in sacks in all three seasons. He's still second in career sacks at South Carolina. He was a first team All SEC as a junior and was a first round selection in the 2000 NFL draft. In 2021, he was inducted into the University of South Carolina Hall of Fame. And in 2017, he was named SEC legend by the SEC Conference. He also showed off some of his skills with a 14-yard punt return, which would show off his agility and ability to move.
Yeah. Rick, so I mean, not only is he like all world in college, he was several times Pro Bowler, all pro in the NFL. So, what are your thoughts on Big John Abraham?
Well, I my thoughts are John ought to be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. That's the first thought that comes to my mind about John. I remember watching John play when he was at South Carolina, and I used to marvel at how a guy could not play football until his senior year in high school and turn out to be as good as he was. He was a outstanding player, and I really like John. He's a very, very nice guy. And not only is he a nice person, he was one heck of a football player not only here at South Carolina, but for the Jets as well.
A sack machine. And do you recall? I know when he got the NFL, he did a little end and a little linebacker. Do you recall what he was primarily doing in college?
It was mostly rush end, I believe, if I recall right. He used to rush the passer quite a bit, and he didn't play on any teams that were really really great football teams when he was at Carolina. It's kind of like me. I didn't play on a lot of great football teams, but we both were talented guys, and obviously the NFL saw something in us to draft us as high as they did.
Right. Rollo, let's go to your second player.
I got the great Sterling Sharpe. Grew up in Glenville, Georgia, with his grandparents and siblings, which included his younger brother, Hall of Famer Shannon. He played running back, quarterback, and linebacker. He was a member of the basketball and track teams. He would be recruited to the University of South Carolina in '83, and he would play in 11 games, but only have one catch for 5 yards. He would miss the '84 season with an injury, but he would bounce back in '85, play 11 games, catching 32 passes for 471 yards and two touchdowns. But where he really broke out was his junior year, where he caught 74 passes for 1,100 yards and 10 touchdowns, leading the SEC conference in all three categories. He would also rush 23 times for 104 yards and two touchdowns. He would have a down year his senior year by his standards, catching 56 passes for 862 yards, 862 yards. Those prolific numbers will leave him with 169 career receptions and 2,497 receiving yards, which is what is still the all-time record at South Carolina. And his 74 receptions for 1,100 yards is still the single season record. He was a first-team All-American '87 and helped the Gamecocks reach the '87 Gator Bowl. He also has a 100-yard kickoff return in '87. He has a school record for consecutive games with a reception and most receiving yards in the career. And in 2014, he was inducted to the College Football Hall of Fame. And that same year, he was inducted to the South Carolina Hall of Fame.
Rick, he's yeah, NFL Hall of Famer. He's an all-time great. Did he have any weaknesses in his game? And just what are your thoughts overall on Sterling? I mean, surprised his brother didn't choose to come there as well.
Yeah. Well, I don't think Shannon was recruited as highly, actually. I think he ended up going to Savannah State, which was a smaller school, obviously, than South Carolina. But boy, he was a heck of a player. I know that. And, when I look back at those times, that was, my career went up to 1985. Well, Sterling was still here at Carolina, and I was following them still as a professional athlete and going back and watching Sterling was I used to just marvel at some of the routes he would run and some of the catches that he made. And it was obviously he was going to, it was obvious he was going to be a great football player in professional football. I always thought he would be because he had the size, he had the skill, he had all the intangibles that you look for. And the Green Bay Packers saw that. I think they picked him about the seventh pick of the first round. So, obviously, he had a lot going for him. He's generally recognized, I believe, as probably the best receiver that's ever come out of South Carolina. Yeah, and there's been some really great ones too. I mean, if you go look, I mean, Sidney Rice comes to mind. There's just so many. Alshon Jeffery, so many great receivers have come out of here. But really, I think Sterling probably leads the pack.
Well, that's going to put a dent in my argument right now because we're going to Alshon Jeffery. So, wide receiver, 2009 to 2011 at South Carolina as a freshman. He's a first consensus team All-American freshman. He followed that season by winning the Blitnikoff Award. As a sophomore, having 9 touchdowns, 1,517 total yards, and 8 100-yard games. Obviously named All-American again. As a junior, he was named MVP of the Capital One Bowl game, and that was only in 3 quarters. In 3 quarters, he got 148 yards and a touchdown. I mean, he might have got kicked out for something afterwards, but hey, he still put up huge numbers. He is third in school history with receptions, second in yards, and tied for first in receiving touchdowns. So his stats hold their own there against Sterling. He holds the single season record in yards and receptions. So statistically, he would have had the best season as a wide receiver if we're only talking 1 year. In 2011, that special receiving season with Coach Steve Spurrier, the team went 11-2 and finished ninth in the country, which was their highest ranking ever to that point, finishing. And of course, the school retired his number one jersey retirement. So kudos to that. So I guess it sounds like to you, Rick, Alshon's maybe a little step below Sterling, but what did he do right?
Well, I mean, he was another guy that just knew how to use his body. When he went up to catch passes, he could, he seemed like he was one of those guys that just kind of sailed above everyone else. If the ball was thrown high, he was going to go up and get it. And he was outstanding. And I don't mean any degradation whatsoever against his game because he was outstanding. And I think if you're going to choose an A and B or a B and A, you could interchange these two guys because Sterling and he both were just outstanding football players, and it's hard to argue who was better and who wasn't. But it's you have to pick one, and I don't think you're wrong if you pick either guy.
Yeah, Alshon, he had a respectable NFL career. I know Sterling's was much better in the NFL, but we'll see when we get to our vote here if one of those wide receivers makes our list. I'm gonna move to my defensive player here, and I guess we could put him up against Abraham. So it's gonna be tough for my guys tonight. But I got Jadeveon Clowney, linebacker, 2011 to 2013, putting up 24 sacks in 3 seasons. That's good for third all time, and a school single season record of 13 in one season, and a single game with four and a half sacks against Clemson. He's a two-time first-team All-American, 2012 SEC Defensive Player of the Year. Started all 12 games as a true freshman. That's kind of rare. If somebody can do that, I'm always impressed. Clowney was a master at stripping the ball and hitting people in the backfield. 2013 alone, he had 23 and a half tackles for a loss. Think about that number. His career can be summed up, though, in one play against Michigan. I'm sure I'm going to put the clip on here where he absolutely annihilated the running back in the backfield, hitting him so hard He knocked the guy's helmet off and driving that running back like 4 yards and obviously causing the fumble and Clowney, making the recovery on it. So it's just it's one of those plays that you see when they show the commercials for college football because it will forever be remembered. The helmet popping off, the hit, and you're gonna all enjoy it when you saw the clip of it, I'm sure. But Clowney, what what can you say about Clowney, Rick?
Well, Jadeveon actually is from my hometown. We're from Rock Hill, both of us. We
Oh,
started in Rock Hill, and along with Stefon Gilmore and many, many others that have come out of Rock Hill now to become, NFL caliber players. But Jadeveon was the absolute best athlete I've ever seen as a defensive lineman when he first came out. And I mean that because he was an athlete. He wasn't just a football player. He absolutely could do things that no other defensive lineman could do. Um, he's up in the age now, but it's still a tribute to him that he's still playing. I mean, 12 years later, and here's a guy who was the very number one pick in the NFL draft. And think about this accomplishment. He was the very number one player coming out of high school in the country. And then, he marketed that way, played his way into the number one NFL pick. That you see rarely. So I think you have to place Jadeveon as one of the best players that have ever come through South Carolina, without a doubt.
this is going to be such a tough vote here tonight. Brian, lost your picture, but you want to do your one of yours? There you go.
Yeah. So let's go to Connor Shaw. 6'1", 210-pound quarterback, was with the Gamecocks from 2010 to 2013. Shaw was back up in his freshman season to Steven Garcia, and he only saw a little bit of action. But Shaw won the starting job in his sophomore season. He did well. 14 TD passes to just 6 INTs, a 148.3 rating. He led his team to an 11-2 record and threw 2 TD passes, ran for another in South Carolina's win over Nebraska in the Capital One Bowl. In his junior season, Shaw threw 17 TDs to just 7 interceptions, improved his rating 10 points from the season before, again led the Gamecocks to 11-2, and tossed a couple of TD passes in their bowl win over Michigan. His senior season was really something. 24 TD passes to just get this 1 INT. Again, 11-2, this time a number 4 national ranking, and he put on a show in their bowl game against Wisconsin. 3 TD passes, 1 TD run, and 1 TD reception. Shaw is the winningest QB in South Carolina history, and he was a perfect 17-0 at home. And he truly helped South Carolina football to get to a whole new level.
Rick, quarterbacks always get the glory. It's sometimes rightfully so, but a lot of it's always a team effort. So, what can you tell us about Connor? And I mean, in South Carolina history, is it because he played QB that he is so recognized?
Well, I think anytime you're talking about a quarterback, they're going to get recognized as long as they're winning. And then people
Right.
remember you when you lose too, if you're a quarterback. So I think with Connor, I think one word really sums him up. It's called winner. He was just a winner. And I saw so many times with Connor when it would be third and 5 yards to go. And mind you, Connor wasn't the prototypical big, strong quarterback. He was just a smart guy. He was extremely smart. And so many times it would be third and 5, and Connor would drop back to pass. And here he comes. He would look like he's looking downfield, and then he would skirt himself for 6 yards just to move the chains, to move the chain. He was a classic quarterback for just moving the chains. So many of these guys panic when they get back there, when they feel a rush and all. But Connor was never like that. He just felt the pressure. He could get himself out of there. And obviously, he had a much better arm than people ever gave him credit for, because look at the production that he had with all the TD passes he had. So he was just a winner. He was just a guy who, that players rallied around. And, it's hard to argue when you know the word winner, and then you look at his record while he was here at South Carolina.
Brian, who's your second player?
Okay, so let's go on the defensive side of the ball here. Eric Norwood, 6'4", 245 pounds. Originally, he was a defensive end, was with the Gamecocks from 2006 to 2009. Norwood really hit the ground running. As a freshman, he recorded 7 QB sacks, 9 tackles for loss, and was named first team freshman All-American as well as All SEC. His sophomore season was even better. 6 QB sacks, 19 tackles for loss, 3 fumble recoveries, including 2 in the same game against Kentucky. And again, he was All SEC. His junior season, he moved to linebacker, and his great production continued. 14 tackles for loss, 9 QB sacks, a couple of fumble recoveries, and was All SEC for a third time. After some back and forth, Norwood decided to come back for his senior season, and again, he was great. 7 QB sacks, 11 tackles for loss, 3 blocked kicks, and he achieved the ultimate personal goal of being named All-American. And he also became the Gamecocks' all-time QB sack leader.
So his stats beat out Clowney's, Rick. I mean, that's hard to argue with that.
Well, you can argue those stats, and stats sometimes can be misleading. I will say he was fantastic. No, he was a fantastic football player. He seemed to always be around the football, which was unusual when you take a guy who is, played one position as a down lineman, and then you put him back and stand him up at linebacker. That's quite an achievement. And, he was just one of those guys. Again, I think you just have to say, this guy knew what he was doing. He never got intimidated by other, the moment was never too big for him. And obviously, look at all the honors that he's gotten as a result.
You're right. So we're gonna move to the corner position here, and Stefon, excuse me, I was gonna say Steven there, but so Stefon Gilmore, so very, very intelligent man. Went to South Point High School, but 2008 heads to South Carolina, participates in spring practice, and actually ends up making the team as a spring starter at corner, and appears in all 12 games for the Gamecocks once again as a true freshman. I mentioned earlier how that is like a rare feat. So he got 52 tackles, 5 for loss, 2 sacks, 9 passes defended, and that earned him freshman All-American honors by the College Football News. He's occasionally even appeared on offense, which I love two-way play. I mean, we're seeing that now in the NFL with Travis Scott, of course. But let's see. He completed, a 29-yard pass to the guy that I represented earlier, Alshon Jeffery, in the fourth quarter in the Chick-fil-A Bowl. So, I mean, that's always cool. But statistically, as a defenseman, I mean, he's a third-team All-American in 2010, first-team All-SEC, freshman All-American in 2009. He had an extremely good career. In my opinion, he's the best DB in South Carolina school history. I'm not positive that will put him on the Mount Rushmore overall, though. So, what are your thoughts, Rick, on Stefon Gilmore?
Well, we've had so many great defensive backs come out of South Carolina, and yes, Stefon is absolutely at the top of that list. One of the things that you guys might know or might not know is that Stefon Gilmore and Jadeveon Clowney were high school teammates, and they came out. Yes, they both went to South Point High School in Rock Hill, again, my hometown. So, and I was fortunate enough to see both of them play in high school. And Stefon was a quarterback also in high school. But one thing that's always impressed me about Stefon is that he is one of the smartest kids that you can find. I mean, in terms of he knows football, he knows leverage, and he always uses his leverage to make plays. And by that, I mean his alignment. He's one of the most sound fundamental players there was in the game because, and that's what I always did too. I always prided myself, you got to be fundamentally sound because one false step can get you beat. And we've seen that so many times. I see it every week on TV watching games now. But Stefon was one of those guys that not only was he smart, he was a technician. And being a technician as a defensive back is vital. And I think he was the epitome of being a great technician as a defensive back.
And just something to add on him. Not every player can say this night. Every year he was in college, he played in a bowl game. So kudos for that.
Yeah.
So one more thing about Gilmore real quick is he's got a really rare feat. He actually got a 2-point conversion on a pick six in a bowl game, which I don't know if anybody else has ever done that before. I mean, maybe there has been, but
Yeah.
that's saying something.
Yeah, that brings back an old memory. I can't. Yeah, that is true. I didn't even think of that, but yeah, that's a great call.
Nice stat, Brian. Let's see who we got. Brian, you want to bring up George Rogers?
We got George Rogers, running back. This guy was a 4-year starter from 77 to 1980. Just got better with every year. I mean, first year, 623 yards, 3 touchdowns. And then you really turned it on 78. It went over 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns there. 79. I mean, just hit a new gear. I mean, led the country in rushing yards with 1548, 8 TDs. And then 1980 was one of the best seasons for a running back in his time for sure. He had more carries than anybody else, 297, 1781 on the yardage. I mean, that was led the nation, 14 TDs. I mean, touched the ball more than anybody else. Just the offense absolutely went through George Rogers, and then of course won the Heisman Trophy. Just one heck of a back all the way around. And he could lower the shoulder a little bit too, and he had a little bit of speed.
And a nice NFL career as well. Rick, is he the greatest running back in school history?
Without a doubt. I played 2 years with George. I was a junior and senior his freshman and sophomore years. And we're still great friends today. And he's just, he's not only was a great football player, he's a great individual. And he's just really a really good guy. But when you talk about football ability and a running back, there's only one guy that ever scared me more than George Rogers to tackle when I was an NFL guy, and that was Earl Campbell. So that tells you a lot about George Rogers. George was very menacing to. I saw one game we were playing Wake Forest, I believe, and a defensive back came up to hit him, and he literally lifted the defensive back off of his feet and put him on his back. And then he scored on the same play. It was on about the 20-yard line going in. And I thought to myself, I said, man, that guy's a bull. I mean, you just don't do things like that, And he was not only a power running back, he was a lot like Earl Campbell in that both of them could run around you as well as run over you. And that's what I thought that's what made both of them great. They were very much similar to one another, and they were both great because they had that inner ability to be able to do. It could keep a defensive player off balance because you didn't know if he was going to run over you or try to juke you and run around you. So, but George was fantastic, one of the best running backs without a doubt that I've ever seen. And when you go back to those numbers, his senior year numbers, you got to remember that South Carolina opened up that schedule that year, I believe, with Michigan and Southern Cal. So he wasn't running against, inferior competition there. I mean,
Right, right.
they played Michigan and Southern Cal back to back, and George had over 100 yards on both those games. I know that. So he was just a tremendous, tremendous football player.
Very impressive. Well, let's move into our vote. And Rick, you're gonna get to pick your own here in a minute. You'll pick your own Mount Rushmore.
Okay.
Brian, you and I, we'll get to pick two each. So I'll let you
Okay.
go first, then I'll pick my one, and then you can pick your second one. We'll see how they
Then
compare here to Rick's.
Okay. Um, if I'm gonna pick two, I mean, obviously you got to have Rogers on there, so let's just get him off the list. And I think being the number one overall pick, with Clowney, I think Clowney deserves a nod for that.
Excellent. And I was going to pick Rogers too, so I don't have to do that. Yeah, so despite the fact that I represented Alshon Jeffery there, I still think Sharpe was a little better. So I'm going to throw Sharpe onto my list. And for my second guy, I love quarterbacks, but man, they always get too much love. I got to throw Abraham on for my list. So we got our Mount Rushmore here then as Rogers, Clowney, Sharpe, and Abraham. Who would you go with, Rick?
Oh boy, this is really tough. But I mean, you have to put George up there. George is without a doubt the best I think the best running back that has not only come through here, but maybe throughout the whole South. I mean, if you look at it like that, now, I'm not going to say he was better than, Earl Campbell or anybody, or Tony Dorsett or any of those guys or Walter Payton, but I mean, he was a fantastic football player. So I think you have to put George on there. I also think you have to put Sterling on. Sterling Sharpe was a phenomenal football player, and most of the people around here recognize 1-2 is Rogers and Sharp. I mean, that's the 1-2 thought when you think about great football players that have come through South Carolina. And there's been so many. I mean, there's been a lot of really good football players, and people that don't follow South Carolina football would probably be amazed if you go and look and see how many great football NFL players have come through this school now. It's three. I think you have to put Jadeveon Clowney on there. I think you have to say Clowney because not only was he the number one pick out of high school, he was the number one pick out of the NFL. And then what a career. I mean, is he what he was now, what he was 12 years ago? No, but he's still playing 12 years later. That's the whole point. I mean, the guy
Right.
still has skill. So just imagine if he still had the skill that he had when he first got in the league. It was just, you have to include Jadeveon, I think. And boy, I'll tell you, number four is it's just a toss up. I have to, I don't know. To me, it would be between Alshon and also I think you would have to look at John Abraham. I think, with John's career that, there's a lot of guys I think that don't have the college credentials that end up going into the NFL, and they're better NFL players than they are in college. And not that John wasn't a great college player because he was, but I think John really shined in pro football. So I can't pick between those two guys. I just think they're both number four together. I mean, I think Alshon deserves to be on that list. And hey, even the other guys that were mentioned, the Connor Shaw, it's hard to keep Connor out of there when you look at his record. But I think you have to go on the total body of work, and the total body of work would at number four to me. Um, and it's hard to pick against Gilmore. I mean, look at that. Look at that career. And here's a guy right now that could still be playing himself. So I think I would have to probably just narrow it down and say John or Alshon or Gilmore. I mean, I don't think you can differentiate those guys. I think they're almost interchangeable.
All right, so the politically correct answer there for number four. Nice job, guys. Let's move into our Q&A. Brian, Leroy, and then me.
We got week 13, 1982, Patriots at Chicago. You picked off a Jim McMahon pass, took it 99 yards to the house. Do you remember what you saw as that play developed, and were you out of gas after all that running?
Well, I do remember that play, and I'm very proud of that play. Honestly, I think that that game was really amazing game because it was played, I think, on like December the 4th in Chicago, and we had just come out of the strike. The NFL strike was of '82. And I remember seeing Jim kind of fade to his right. And they had a wide receiver from Tulsa named Ricky Watts. Well, he was trying to find Ricky in the end zone. And so I was playing free safety, and I just kind of saw him kind of just move to his right a little bit. And I saw out of the corner of my eye Ricky Watts. And I kept thinking, he's open. He's open, but I'm going to bait him for a minute. I'm just going to bait him and see if he's going to throw this thing. And as soon as his arm cocked forward, I made my move, and I cut in front of Ricky actually. And what I do remember about that play was so funny because it was me and a big defensive lineman, Kenny Sims, because I was running down the sideline. It was me, Kenny Sims, and Jim McMahon. So I had a big defensive lineman in front of me, and I thought to myself, there is no way Jim McMahon he's not going to catch me, number one, but he is not going to tackle me with Kenny Sims running in front of me. So it was just almost comical. And after the game, and yes, I was out of gas once I got to the far. But I remember after the game, Jim came over to me, and you got to know Jim because Jim has the funniest voice. He was so funny. He looked at me and he says, "Dang, Rick, I never saw you. I said, well, Jim, I saw you in that arm, and that's when I made my move.
Go ahead, Leroy.
First, it's nice to meet you, Mr. Rick.
Yes,
Leroy.
sir.
I'm a lifelong Seahawk fan. I'm originally from Washington State, and I live here in
Awesome.
Charleston, South Carolina. So,
Awesome.
yeah, I was excited when I had the opportunity. Unfortunately, I'm computer illiterate, so had a hard time getting on today. As a Seahawk fan, what's your best experience that you have with your year with the Seahawks? I know you played with some great names on that defense, so.
Well, yeah, it was an honor to play with a lot of those names. I mean, you're talking about Kenny Easley, who was one of the best safeties that ever played
Yes.
football. John Harris was in that secondary with me, and there was just, Dave Brown. I mean, they were really, really great individuals and great football players. I my memories are, of course, we had Dave Craig. We didn't have Jim Zorn then. Jim Zorn, I played against when I was with the Patriots. And
Yes,
then
sir.
when I caught on with the Seahawks, I never realized how really an outstanding football player Dave was. And he was just a smart quarterback. Didn't have all the big arm strength or anything like that, but he was so smart. And he did have one, really good weapon outside in Steve Largett. That wasn't bad.
Yes.
Yeah, Steve Largett wasn't a bad receiver either, but yeah, he went on, and of course he's a Hall of Famer, and no doubt in my mind. He's the only receiver that I ever had to cover that I can honestly say never had to kind of settle down before they went out of when they make a cut to the outside or the inside.
Yes, sir.
It was just so fluid with Largett. He would be like, and he was so slick and crafty that you didn't know, but whether he was going inside, outside. And I remember one time Mike Haynes and I had him covered up in New England, and Mike, of course, is in the Hall of Fame too. And before Mike went to the Raiders, he was with us with the Patriots, as you well know, and that's where he started his career, was with us. And I remember Mike and I had him double covered. And I remember him making this one little move toward me. He ran straight to me as a safety. He was trying to get me to declare, okay, am I going to come across your face, or am I going to go back to the outside? And he did this little move to the inside, and then he just took off straight ahead. And I looked at Mike, I mean, after the play, and I said, have you ever seen a route like that, Mike? He goes, no. He said, that's Steve Largett. That's why you get a route like that.
Wow.
I also noticed that your after your NFL career that you were a chiropractor, and I
Mhm.
grew up in a small town called Yakima, about
Yeah.
3 hours south of Seattle,
Yep.
and my mom worked for a chiropractor also that was a Seahawk, Dan Dornick. I don't know if you
Yeah.
remember him
Right. I
as a running
remember
back.
Dan. Dan played with us. Right.
She worked,
Right.
yeah, I saw y'all played at the same time, and she actually
Yep.
just a footnote, she worked for him for years. So
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, that's wonderful. There was me and I think Dan, and I think there was one player from the Vikings that ended up becoming chiropractors after their football career. I believe Fred Cox. I believe he was a place kicker, Fred Cox, and he was
Oh,
much
okay.
older than us. But I believe the three of us are the only NFL players that I can ever remember, or certainly I don't know if there's been any since us, but I do remember the three of us were about the only ones. And hey, the Seahawks win again. See, two guys out of three ain't bad.
yeah. Right
So,
on. Thank you, Mr. Rick.
Yes, sir. My pleasure.
so you're a member of the board of directors for the South Carolina Hall of Fame there. What goes into the nominee process and how are the final decisions made?
Well, we have a board. We have a board of probably, I'm going to guess, I think it's about 20 people that are on the board. And all decisions are made as they go through the board. I've been on the board now for about 5 years of the Hall of Fame here. And also, I'm actually not. I'm a future president as well of the Hall of Fame here in the next 3 years. So, I'll be a little more active than I have to be right now, but it really is a long process. We get nominations. You wouldn't believe how many players or people of all different sports that have some South Carolina affiliation that aren't in the Hall of Fame now, that are well deserving to be in the Hall of Fame. But it's just so hard to put more than 9 or 10 people in at a year. It used to be only about 5 would get in, but we've expanded that now to around 9 or 10 athletes. But we also receive nominations from fans and or family members or whoever that want to nominate someone to the South Carolina Athletic Hall of Fame. And I'm very fortunate. I've been in there since '98, and I've become real active in the organization and really, really thrilled to be a part of it because, yeah, like I said, you guys would be amazed how many great athletes have come out of South Carolina or have some type of affiliation with South Carolina.
Brian, let me build on that one real quick, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Was was there a player that maybe you felt should have got in, but didn't, maybe because of some of the other people? Was there anybody like that?
You're talking about in the Athletic Hall of Fame?
Yes.
Well, I see it every year that
Yeah. Okay.
it's hard. It's hard to single one person out, and I think you have to. When I got in, I was about 40 years old. Okay, and I think it just means more. I think if you don't get in there right after your career is over, I think you're still living on your laurels from thinking about all that. Unless you win the Heisman Trophy or I think it's pretty evident you're going to be in the Hall of Fame. It's just such a honor to be named, and I think it almost makes you relive your past, the older you are when you get in. And I've always said, I'm not sure any player should ever get in before they're 40 years old. I mean, it's just to me, I just think it means more the older you are and you're able to go back and reminisce because you're just too close to playing when you're still in your 30s,
Right.
and I think it just means so much more to be a member of that Hall of Fame the older you are.
Brian, finish us out.
So, Rick, in New England, you were part of a very good secondary. Featured Raymond Claiborne, Ronnie Lippett, Rowan James, and of course Andre Tippett was wreaking all kind of havoc in the backfield. So, what was it like to be part of that really strong Patriots defensive unit there?
Well, what's interesting, and I'm glad you mentioned this because when I was drafted in the '79 draft, I was a 25th player picked. And when I went to New England, there were already 3 first-round picks in the secondary. We had Ray Claiborne and Mike Haynes, who were on our corners. We had Tim Fox, who was free safety at the time, and I was drafted to play strong safety to begin with. Okay, and then the following year after me, we drafted Roland James, who
Right.
was a first-round pick also. So we actually had 5 first-round picks in the secondary. I can honestly say there was not a better secondary in the NFL when we had 5 first-round picks back there. But I knew at my position, they had told me that, you're going to start out at strong safety and then we're going to move you to free safety because it really was my natural position for professional football. And I mean, I liked playing all the safety positions and all, but free safety was really my more natural position, I think. And after Tim was traded, he got traded to San Diego, and then I moved over to free safety, and Roland, of course, moved over to strong safety. But we were very fortunate, and we're all still friends today, which is wonderful, and we all still talk a little bit, which is great. And it was just a tremendous secondary. I mean, if you guys, I'll never forget one time we were playing the Raiders in New England. And eventually, I think you guys will remember that Mike Haynes was traded to the Raiders. He had a contract holdout. And I'll never forget, we were on the field warming up. You guys will appreciate this story. And this guy walks over while we're doing our drills, and it's the owner, Al Davis. And Al Davis is on the field standing next to my defensive back coach, watching us do drills. And Al had that all black on with the Raider jacket and his slick back hair. And it was just comical to watch. Here's an owner, and you just didn't see stuff like that. But he was actively scouting us, is what he was doing. He was just standing there, never said a word, never said anything, but he literally stood right beside our defensive back coach while we're going through drills. And I thought, that guy's got it together. I mean, this is a guy who wants to scout. He wants to win. And, hey, I think 1980, wasn't that the year they won the Super Bowl? I believe it was, if you go back with the Raiders. And he was just a great owner, and you can't say anything more about him.
Well, Rick, thank you so much for coming on, sharing with us. It's just an honor talking with you.
Hey, thank y'all very much for having me. It's been a real joy. Thank you.
Thank
Everybody make
you,
sure you
Mr. Rick.
hit that like and subscribe button. Very important. We'll see everybody next time. Have a great night.